In a reality pushed slightly into the future, machines have replaced the humans, or at least most of them. Managers and engineers control the northwest of the town of Ilium, New York, known as the most elite members of society, surviving their careers even after the war. The Northeast has already been taken over by the machines, and across the river is the homestead, where the people live, or where the majority of folks who didn't pass the test, one that determines if they're worthy enough to go to college and become an engineer, or be forced to join the Army or the Public Works Organization. But what happens when the machines take over everything, and people become obsolete altogether? That's the question that's asked in Kurt Vonnegut's debut novel, Player Piano. Player Piano follows Dr. Paul Proteus, manager of the Ilium Works, making him the most important person in town. Living with his wife Anita in a neighborhood full of other managers and engineers, Paul is, on paper, successful. But that doesn't mean he's happy. After becoming witness to the dehumanization of the widespread mechanical takeover and the deepening divide between the educated and the people living in the homestead, Paul begins to question the ethics of this automated system, ultimately choosing to rebel against it. Player Piano explores themes of dehumanization, the impact of mechanical and technological progress on our society, and the inherent power struggles between the upper classes and everyone else in between. And isn't that something we're still discussing today? Kurt Vonnegut, author of many famous works, including Slaughterhouse-Five and my personal favorite, Cat's Cradle, became known for his dark humor and highly satirical works, becoming one of the most prolific writers of his time and beyond. But he wasn't always the writer we know. Born in 1922 in Indianapolis, Indiana, to parents Edith and Kurt Sr., he was the youngest of 3 children. With both parents coming from strong architectural backgrounds, his early life was very comfortable, but things quickly changed. When the Great Depression hit, people couldn't afford to build anymore, and that meant Kurt Sr.'s once thriving architectural firm was now plummeting. Vonnegut went from private school to public, and everything about his family dynamic shifted into something darker. His mother grew depressed and angry, taking out her frustrations on the family until her untimely death. Everything he had once known had been destroyed in a matter of a couple years. Later, after finishing high school, Vonnegut enrolled in Cornell University, where he studied biochemistry. While at Cornell, Kurt became staff writer at the university's independent newspaper, the Cornell Daily Sun, where he later became editor, employed with his own column. He was also a member of Cornell's Reserve Officers Training Corps Unit, or ROTC, but due to poor grades and a satirical article in the newspaper, He was placed on academic probation in May of 1942, eventually dropping out in January of 1943. No longer a member of the ROTC, meaning he was no longer able to defer, he knew that he would likely be drafted into the Army. Not wanting to wait to be drafted, he enlisted himself and reported to duty soon after. Deployed throughout many places in Europe and fighting in many famous battles, even becoming a prisoner of war, Vonnegut saw and aided in a lot, shaping his future writing style and critique of the post-war world.
On our great victory in the Gulf, blowing the bejesus out of this third world country that hardly shot back, as killing all those kids, as that's what they were. You didn't dare say a word against it, because Dan Rather thought it was all right. Peter Jennings surprisingly agreed with him. CNN agreed with them. McNeil and Lehrer looked into it, and this was all pretty good. And then they took a poll, and 87% of the American people thought this was pretty good. And I mean, it was such a tragic thing. It's always tragic when you kill a whole lot of people. It's not fun, it's tragic. And, but, in a restaurant, talking to somebody else about this, I had to be very careful because people around you could hear, And
what is that balance between, like, the democratic principle? Well, America was behind it, so in some way it was justified, and then the vote, the wants of the minority or whatever, those few people that may have been against it are sitting there and talking very, very, very quietly. They don't want it known to the general population that they are not.
But the CBS, NBC, CNN, PBS News, McNeil Lehrer, and all that are all at one with the government. It's one big ball of wax. They always agree with the president. They won't criticize him. As they wouldn't criticize Reagan no matter what he said, no matter how absurd it was. I catch hell for being a bad American is criticizing the government and everything. Nobody criticizes the guys who, got us to buy the damn black boomerang. What is it? It's supposedly invisible. Turns out to be not invisible. Billions of dollars. No, they're good Americans. The guys who cleaned out the insurance company and the savings banks, they're just businessmen. They're good Americans. The only bad Americans are people who say, hey, these guys are robbing us blind.
After being discharged with a Purple Heart back to Indianapolis, Vonnegut married his high school sweetheart and moved to Chicago, where he enrolled at the University of Chicago as an anthropology student. Shortly after the couple's first son was born, Kurt landed a job at General Electric as a technical writer turned publicist, where the inspiration for Player Piano was born. Vonnegut began writing Player Piano in the late 1940s, often at night after long days at General Electric. He was inspired and disturbed by what he saw. An environment obsessed with efficiency and engineering, where human workers were increasingly viewed as unnecessary. This was Vonnegut's first real attempt at long-form fiction. He once said, quote, "I never knew what the hell I was doing. I just wrote the book." And yet, for all its imperfections, Player Piano contains the DNA of everything he'd write later. The biting satire, the bureaucratic absurdity, the ordinary man caught in a machine beyond his control. In an interview with Playboy, Vonnegut had this to say about his early writing career and the writing of Player Piano. And in an interview at a writer's workshop, Vonnegut had this to say about crafting stories.
Gadget as a Model A Ford, how to get the damn thing started again. And the advice was all terribly interesting, and we all came up through this world. I was writing short stories for slick magazines, and so we know how to tell a story. I can tell you in about 5 minutes, but younger people often it's considered corrupt to accept advice of that sort. But the basic rule that the magazine would tell you is don't put anything in a story that does not either reveal character or advance the action. And this Model A is going to run forever. I mean, it goes. If you will, if you will simply do that, and that's hack advice. And a lot of people would say, well, you know, this is a low-grade person, and basically the enemy of art, who would give formula advice like that. But if you obey that, that story will just go forever.
It works.
And it makes for terribly efficient storytelling. And you get into the frame of mind to do that.
Player Piano wasn't a bestseller. It didn't win awards, but it got Vonnegut noticed. And more importantly, it taught him who he was on the page. The themes he introduced in this book, dehumanization, absurdity, futility, would echo through the rest of his works. In Cat's Cradle, technology creates the end of the world. In Breakfast of Champions, free will unravels. In Slaughterhouse-Five, time becomes meaningless. Player Piano also predicted real concerns we're grappling with today. Automation, AI, wealth inequality, a disappearing middle class. In many ways, the novel is more relevant now than when it was published. And to think, it all started because a man in a lab coat looked at a punch card machine and thought, what if this thing replaces us all? Kurt Vonnegut once said, quote, "We have to continually be jumping off cliffs and developing our wings on the way down." Player Piano was his first jump. And even though he didn't have wings yet, he kept falling forward until something caught him.
I suspect that God rations different sorts of people and assumed that we were going to be nomads or small communities of maybe 50, 100 people at the largest, and that God made sure that genetically we had a leader, we had somebody who could run very fast, we had a seer, possibly an epileptic, who would get us in touch with the gods, and a storyteller. The storytellers are very common, as if you're in any university in the country. Mm-hmm. If you call together a creative writing class, there can be a remarkable number of people who are born with this talent, because God wanted us to have enough storytellers. And now, in a country of 200 million people, the conglomerates are saying, well, let Mario Puzo tell the stories for us all, and we'll give him $2 million. And let Frank Sinatra sing all your songs, and we'll give him $5 million a year, and the rest of you, you don't need to sing, you don't need to dance, you don't need to write poems, you don't need to tell stories anymore. That's all taken care of in either Burbank, California, or New York City, and it's a tragedy because there are all these people with a God-given talent.
You can teach people to write?
I can teach them how to tell stories.
Yeah. What do you teach them? I'm fascinated by that. I mean, I'm not trying to, I want to simplify, but I'm not trying to be glib about it.
I mean, there are many things that are pathetic about, this book and me and everything else, but there is no such trade anymore. There are creative writing courses all over the country now. And there is no short story industry anymore. There was a huge one when I started out. Yeah. And I could quit a good job with General Electric. I was a PR guy for them. I had hospitalization, membership in a golf club, and everything.
Everything you could ever want.
Yeah, but I could make more money writing short stories, and I moved my family to Cape Cod. Yeah. And television killed the magazines and killed the industry. But this country...
Killed those magazines.
Yeah. But this country used to love short stories. People are writing short stories still in university towns all over the country. Perhaps in, Durham?
Yeah, Durham, right.
I'll bet you there's a magazine there.
There is.
Which has sprung up.
Right. There is, absolutely.
Which publishes, well, this is true of Bloomington, Indiana, too. Yeah. This is Moscow, Idaho. is all these campuses, somebody has started a magazine, and people, in order to make their souls grow, are damn well going to write a short story. It may knock your block off. It may be so good, but there's no place to publish it anymore. But yeah, people are damn well practicing art anyway with no hope of getting paid off. And I wish people would write poems to each other. That's what they're for heaven's sakes.
To try to come to, or someone once said, I guess it was Auden who said, I don't know what I think until I see what I wrote. Yeah. Therefore, by writing a poem, you give the clearest voice of your innermost feelings.
Well, you say, can you teach creative writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. I mean, the same way a golf pro can take a few strokes off your game by telling you where to put your foot or whatever. I mean, there's things known about storytelling, which start with Aristotle, Aristotle's Poetics. There's lots of good advice. Yeah.
What are the God-given talents that a writer has?
He doesn't know until he tries, or she doesn't know until she tries.
It's to put one sentence.
And it doesn't, again, you mentioned world champions.
Yeah.
Everybody shouldn't consider himself in competition with a world champion. And this is one reason good writers are unlikely to come from an English department, is because the English department teaches you good taste too early. And, if I were a professor, Professor Sweetbreads at Duke, and a student brought me a piece of writing, and I'd say, well, Charles, I really have never had a student capable of this quality of work. This is an excellent story. I enjoyed reading it. I want you to know. And I really don't know what to do with someone as obviously gifted as you are. Let me think. Let me show you how James Joyce dealt with the same situation. Put you in competition
with James Joyce,
with a world champion.
Exactly.
Immediately.
It's just
see, I came up through a chemistry department.
Yeah, right.
And so I wrote, and there was nobody there to tell me whether it was any good or not. I was just making my soul grow writing stories.
Yeah.
And when I teach creative writing or encourage people to write, just make your soul grow, man.
I know, it does. And but your point's well taken in that I mean, I can look at career patterns and see where people who had to go out on their own and who had to develop in business, entrepreneurial skills, had to develop in journalism, their own models, that kind of thing, develop broader and different and more interestingly than those who were early on put into a box and put into a place in which all the standards and all the norms were set and dominated by people at the top.
Yeah. And, well, as I say, human instincts are often wonderful, often they're terrible.
Yeah.
But people are responding now to intelligently, instinctively, to all sorts of dampers on their lives, all sorts of cultural dampers on their lives, like, the monopolies of the communications industry, and, few outlets for publishing, for big-time publishing, few outlets on television. Mm-hmm. All right, they're doing it locally anyway, and God bless them, because that's smart, because their souls are going to grow.
Let me go back to writing. Are you working on anything new?
No, because I'm 76 and I'm completely in print, and I've been allowed to say
completely in print.
Everything I've ever written is in print.
So why not be? I mean, because you're 76, your faculties are not as good as they were when you were 56, and therefore you stop writing.
I'm out of stuff. I don't have anything more to say. You know what Herman Melville said about whalers?
What?
Do you know why they don't talk?
No.
Because they've said everything they could possibly say.